Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to Evoke Therapy Program's broadcast. I'm Dr. Brad Reedy. Today is Tuesday, November 29, 2022. And tonight I'm going to be talking about authentic gratitude. Right after the holiday of Thanksgiving, I thought it would be a good time to lean into this idea of authentic gratitude. I'm also going to share a couple of other thoughts that have come to me this week. Before I jump into the topic, I just want to make this announcement again that we're having our our third conscious parenting workshop that'll be coming up next year, February 24th. We've had our first. It was the first one we ever did. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and am looking forward to our second one this Friday. But due to popular demand, we've opened up a third version. The reason that we're having several of these workshops is we want to keep the groups small enough so that there's an interactive feel to it beyond just listening to me lecture or the podcast or these broadcasts. I want to have an opportunity to talk to you about your specific challenges as a parent. So we'll be talking about conscious parenting during that workshop. You can find all the details. You can call or email us at intensives@evoketherapy.com or call our toll-free number on our website to sign up. And I look forward to that. So I was thinking about this leading up to the Thanksgiving holiday and this idea of my experience. This is not one of those things that I'm going to sell really hard. It's just my experience of what I would call a forced gratitude, where somebody, maybe to try to be helpful, maybe to try to help me overcome what might seem like a negative mindset, get me into these feelings of gratitude. And I hear a lot of people talk about how that idea of practicing gratitude can be very helpful for them. I have several friends who will practice a gratitude list every day, or some will journal about it on special occasions. But I want to offer an alternative and talk about how that idea of being told or telling people to practice gratitude can approximate and sound like the echoes of a childhood where we were told that there were good feelings to feel and not so good feelings to feel. So I wrote this last week. I wrote, instead of practicing gratitude, you can try practicing mindfulness. I find that feeling all of our feelings and being present with what is inevitably leads to gratitude. In fact, I think, for me, the most immediate outcome of mindfulness is this idea of, or excuse me, the most immediate outcome of mindfulness is gratitude. Because to be mindful is to be present with what is, and outside of an acute, painful, or crisis event, most of the things that are present with me are going okay. I wrote this as the caption to this, and this is where what I want to build off. I wrote, personally, I don't like the suggestion of practicing gratitude. Perhaps it is because it reminds me of messages from my past when I was in pain that I, quote, should be grateful, unquote, for what I do have. But practicing mindfulness, feeling whatever I'm feeling, leads me to gratitude. I have learned to honor what is, which includes many of the wonderful things about my life. The great Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh explains that we are often not mindful of the non-toothache. That is, until we have a toothache, and then we long for the joy of the non-toothache. And I think about that teaching of his, of this idea that in the moment of a toothache, one of the first thing that comes to my mind, and I'm sure comes to a lot of people's mind, is how much they've taken for granted the non-toothache. If you have a mindful breathing practice, to be grateful just for being alive, to be grateful for the out breath and for the in breath. If you have a mindful eating practice, if you can slow things down, you can appreciate not just the flavors and the texture in your mouth, the nourishment, but the people that have prepared it. And that doesn't just mean the one that prepared that meal for you. That means it goes back to I imagine hundreds and thousands of people that came together to create this food, to bring it to your table, to this moment. So mindfulness is about being present with it, what is, and there's no directive. In fact, I think one of the biggest barriers to mindfulness practice for a lot of people, or meditation, is the idea that there's a good or a right feeling to have, right? That if something comes into my mind, then I fight it, I resist it instead of just observing it. One of my mindfulness practices is a body scan, a practice of breathing in a body scan. And again, most days, although I have lower back pain on occasion or might have a headache here and there or other sore muscles or joints, most of the time, most of my body is feeling okay. So the idea of mindfulness, of focusing on what is, will inevitably lead us to gratitude. One of the things I've shared with many folks is I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, MS, in 2015. And after a couple of months, maybe 2 or 3 months of what felt like a low grade depression at the news of this diagnosis, there was a transformation into gratitude. Not because, again, somebody told me to practice gratitude, but because I realized that at the given moment, at this given moment, I don't have a lot of pain. I have most all of my dexterity and balance. I have very few symptoms. Those could escalate at any moment, but being mindful of what I do have leads me to a gratitude. So when I talk about authentic gratitude, it's something we actually did at the Thanksgiving table. Instead of having a prayer of thanks or everybody go around and share gratitude, we had somebody lead us in a mindfulness about being present with what was at the table, the people that were surrounding, and of course, out of that came a lot of gratitude. So that was the idea, to shift between telling somebody what to feel to sort of identifying good and bad feelings and just learning to feel all of our feelings. And that's going to be a theme tonight as I talk about a couple of other things related to this idea of practicing gratitude and what it means to me. I want to be clear. I have, I'm sure that there are thousands and millions of people who would add testimony to a practice of gratitude, bringing them joy. So I'm not trying to take away from their experience. I'm trying to give an idea to those of us who might have had some similar experiences to mine, where we were told what to feel, that there's another option or another way to find that joy and gratitude. I want to talk about spiritual bypassing, and I want to talk about toxic positivity and gaslighting. In fact, I read today, I think it was in the Washington Post or one of the news sources that I follow, that said that gaslight was the Webster's Dictionary word of the year because it's becoming so popular. So I'm going to talk about that. Spiritual bypassing is when somebody uses a belief system, a set of beliefs, a context to avoid the developmental task at hand. For example, having a loss of a loved one or experiencing great pain or heartache. Part of developing, evolving, stretching, and growing as a human being is to lean into all the feelings. I remember I had a colleague once tell me that some evangelist knocked on his door and said, "Would you like to learn how to be happy, how to be more happy in your life and have more joy?" And my colleague said that he responded to them by saying, "I really want to celebrate all of my feelings." And of course, those that are more unpleasant are hard to celebrate. But it's in that pain, it's in that sorrow that we can also find our love and our joy and our greatest value. It's through that pain and through that grief and that loss that we find a deeper and richer joy and gratitude. At least it is for me. I love a lot of the ideas of what Buddhism teaches about this, that the temporary nature of life, which I think a lot of us struggle with, right? The fact that we're all mortal, that we're all going to die, that nothing is guaranteed to us, and that awareness brings a great deal of anxiety. That uncertainty brings a great deal of anxiety. But what the Buddhists teach and suggest is that what that can also lead us to is back to a gratitude for what we have today, back to our the present moment and the joy that we have. And for me, that was a big shift in midlife. Constantly being afraid of the end, of loss, wanting to hold tightly, cling tightly to the joys in my life, to the people in my life, because I was worried about their pain. I think that relates to a lot to parents that we deal with at Evoke therapy programs, right? They're clinging tightly to their joy, to their children, to their children's well-being, and the fear that comes from some of the decisions that their children are making that are real and real scary can again disrupt our own serenity and our own peace of mind. But this idea of recognizing, one of the things I say to clients now and again is, you can't guarantee the outcome. It's not about letting go of outcomes because it's a good idea. The fact of the matter is the idea that you can control outcomes like the safety of somebody that you care about is itself the illusion in the first place. So you've already built your house on a sandy, shaky foundation. So yes, spirituality and a sense of wonder, of the miracle of life can definitely be a part of everybody's practice, can bring joy to all of us, can help us to embrace the wonder of life, the beauty of life. And part of this life is the grief, the loss, the anxiety of uncertainty. And if we simply just whitewash every difficult thing, every difficult task in the side of some kind of doctrine, some kind of dogma, we miss the opportunity to grow and to stretch. And in my experience as a psychotherapist, as a father, as a husband, as a friend, as a person, that embracing of more or all of it is the thing that leads to my greatest strength, my greatest resiliency. Toxic positivity. This is an extraordinarily common characteristic. In fact, I think it's one maybe of the themes or energies under the larger umbrella of gaslighting, which I'll talk about in a minute. But this idea that of overvaluing happy and positive feelings at the expense of the other feelings, of all of the other feelings. We do that with our children. This is, for me, this is the most exciting part about tonight's broadcast. I cannot tell you how every day, every week, I'm confronted with my own fallibility as a parent, as a father. Not a week goes by where, especially my 14-year-old, the one that I have left living in the home, there's not a week that goes by that she doesn't tell me something true about myself that I don't want to be so. Some character flaw, some limitation, some way of relating to her that's hurtful or painful. And my first instinct, and I see this with the parents that I work with all the time, my first instinct is, well, mine is to flee. I fantasize about running away. In those moments where my daughter said to me, like I shared with this audience a couple of weeks ago, when my daughter said, I was hurt that you snapped at me this morning when we were getting in the car. And when I apologized, and she said, you do it all the time. And I didn't want that to be true. I started to create a story in my head where what she said wasn't true. But the fact of the matter of it is true. I do snap. I do lose my temper. I do raise my voice. I do use my anger and my size and my voice and my intimidation to try to control things. So this idea that children have to feel happy, that happiness, that joy is bad. Even the idea that we have, if I say good feelings or positive feelings, everybody knows what I'm talking about. Of course, the implication is that there are bad feelings, but that doesn't quite make sense. If you send your child to Evoke's Wilderness Therapy Program, we're not going to try to help them to be happy. That's a fool's errand. We're going to try to help them to feel everything that they need to feel, to be present in their life. I really did think, and I bet if you ask a lot of therapists and they're honest with themselves, maybe even most therapists, if they're honest with themselves, that I was going to enter a career where I was going to help people to feel happy. But it wasn't long into the practice before I realized my job was to help people feel everything: sadness, hurt, fear, anxiety, worry, grief, loss, all of those things. And it is by feeling those things that we heal, that we integrate, that we become whole. And what I would say to anybody listening to this or watching this, if you're in a downward spiral, if you're in um, an emotional place that feels especially compromised and unpleasant and unhappy and sad and grief, I would say keep going. But find somebody, ideally somebody outside of your immediate family, Find somebody, a sponsor, a trusted friend, a therapist who can walk it with you so you don't have to do it alone. I think loneliness is one of the most difficult feelings, one of the most triggering feelings for most people. So while we can't solve people's grief, you can't say, bring somebody back to life that somebody's lost, or undo a heartache or a heartbreak or a hurtful situation. What we can do is we can offer our presence, our quiet, calm, loving, reassuring presence. And it's in and so many of us parents struggle with this. And I do too, all of the time. I cannot tell you how much how lately I've become so aware of the disconnect that I have between what I teach you all and my very practice of it on a daily basis. That I can stumble or trip over the things that I teach about nearly every day. So this takes work and practice. It takes a lifetime. Like I've said lately, in my version of therapy, which is not Brad Reedy or Evoke Therapy's version of therapy, although we both embrace it, but we're really just talking about the origins of psychology and of attachment theory. That in this work, there's no hack, there's no quick fix, there's no epiphany that's going to make it all better. But what there is a process that you can engage on with another person and find comfort in connection with that person, that therapist, that coach, and step forward one little step at a time courageously into your future. I was thinking about this last night and thinking about perhaps one of the best compliments somebody could give of me is that he never gave up. He hasn't given up. And that's really all it is. Because when I get criticized from my children, from my spouse, from others, I just want to hide. I just want to retreat. I fantasize if I just go away, maybe everybody would be better off without me. That's how deep and profound and immediate the shame is in me. Or sometimes I fight, right? If it's a flight or a fight response, sometimes I'll fight and battle back. But most instinctively, I want to hide. When we're teaching parents in our program, we do a tremendous amount of parent support. These broadcasts are part of that parent support. One of the things that parents will often say is, I get my hand slapped all the time. I get in trouble. I say the wrong thing. As if the goal is to say the right thing. That's what people think. That's what I know. That's what I think. The goal isn't to say the right thing. The goal is to be human, to learn, to expand, to grow, to evolve, to be human on the journey. And what children need, maybe as much as anything that they need, is they needed the example of a human being that's imperfect, but not giving up, who can survive the 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 powerful effects of shame and guilt and pick themselves up again and try again. So if you're one of those parents, if you're in couples therapy, if you're in any kind of family therapy, and you're learning new skills and tools and becoming aware as you go through this process about the mistakes that you're making in communication theory, or how your thoughts and ideas and hopes, intentions aren't matching with how they're coming across to other people. If that's your experience, which I find to be extraordinarily common, what I would say to you is don't give up. Keep going. And I'll go with you if I'm your therapist. And the goal isn't to get it right or to perfect it. I remember when my daughter came back from her first intensive as a participant and had some things to share with me that weren't helpful. And I initially responded horribly. After all I had learned, after how well I thought I'd prepared myself, I responded with the exact wrong response. The one that, in essence, proved the point of the feedback that she was giving me. And then I asked for a second chance, which she gave me, and I did a little bit better. But the point is, she told me not too long ago, years after this happened, she said, I was almost relieved when you screwed it up. If you'd gotten it right or perfect, I think I would have doubted myself and my experience. But the fact that you did the exact thing that I was complaining about was validated and made me feel more safe in my own humanity, in essence. See, if we have to get it right, if it's about getting our hands slapped or saying the wrong thing or getting in trouble, which so many of us regress to in a therapeutic process, if it's about those things, then we're all doomed. And our children then are just as afraid as we are of making mistakes. But if we can show them some elasticity, right? Some flexibility, some humanness, some fall down and get back up and fall down again and get back up again. If we can show them that, then it becomes implicitly safe for them to be human, to make mistakes, to say they're sorry and to try again. So toxic positivity is the overvaluing of what we would call happy and positive feelings, and the undervaluing or the discarding of all of the feelings. As we know, there's no feelings that are wrong or bad. They just are. And part of psychotherapy is about integration, right? Learning to feel all of those things, becoming more authentic. Gaslighting comes from a movie. The term comes from a movie called Gaslight. I think it was in the late 30s, early 40s, black and white. Ingrid Bergman was in it. And the basic story is about it's actually, it holds up. It's a decent story. It has that old movie feel to it, but I thoroughly have enjoyed watching it a couple of times since I sought it out to understand why everybody was using this term gaslighting and where it comes from. And the story is basically about this woman, Ingrid Bergman, who marries this killer, this murderer. And what he does to try to make her second guess herself is she starts to wonder about some things that she's seeing, some things that she's feeling. As he starts to adjust the gas lighting in the house, because the house was lit by gas back then, turning it down and having it go on and off. And I don't want to ruin the story for you if you want to watch it, but turning down the gas and then pretending as if nothing was happening. So it's trying to challenge somebody else's reality, tell them that they're crazy. And when I hear people talk about gaslighting and gaslight, what I hear a lot is that only severe toxic narcissists do this. I don't believe that's true. In fact, I wrote something and reshared it just recently where I said most parents gaslight their children. In fact, regrettably, I have gaslit my children more than I'm happy to admit. But it's just a natural instinct to preserve the ego that I am good. So if you're mad, if you're sad, it's not just when our children are mad at us that we're prone to gaslighting, but sometimes it's when they're just sad or hurt or discouraged or feeling hopeless or angry at somebody else. Because in a very real sense, we parents, both genetically, it's in our coding, but also contextually in our environment, we have been taught that it's our responsibility to help our children be happy. From an evolutionary perspective, it makes sense, right? The more that the parent cares about the child's distress and pain, the more likely the child is going to live long enough to pass on their genes. It makes perfect sense. It's obvious. But of course that mechanism can be distorted. Can develop a mutation, so to speak, where we take on too much. Where our children's sadness is something we think we need to fix. Something like 15 years ago, I was walking to a campsite with one of the young men that I was working with who was graduating from our program and moving on to a therapeutic boarding school. He knew about it in advance for a couple of weeks. And his grandparents were there because his parents were out of the picture. I think one of them was absent or deceased, and the other one was in prison. And so his grandparents were raising him. Tragic, heartbreaking story. But the grandparents were doing their best job to fill the role. And as I pull up to the campsite to have our very last session with the family before the young man and his grandparents leave the next day and go on to the school, the grandmother met me by my car, heard me coming, and came out of the car. And she said, "Things aren't going well. Our grandson is really having trouble." And I said, "Well, tell me a little bit about what's happening." She said, "Well, he said he's really sad to be going to this therapeutic school." And I said, "Okay, what else?" And she said, "Well, that's it." So I said, "Let's get into the session." And again, I asked the grandparents to describe the recent events of that day and how their grandson had expressed to them that he was sad that he was going to onto a school. And I was waiting to hear that he was being manipulative, that he was threatening, that he was guilting his grandparents, that he had some kind of um, out of control behavior related to this feeling. But I didn't hear it. I looked over at him. He was cooking while we were doing the session, just stirring a can of boiling water and pasta, and he was stirring it. And I could see the sly smile and the look on his face because he knew he hadn't done anything inappropriate or unhealthy. He knew he was expressing sadness, but the grandparents were so conditioned. The grandparents were so conditioned, like so many of us, that they thought something was broken and nothing was broken. I'll tell one last story about this idea of all of these things, because I think it's one of the most meaningful examples. There was a time when I was running marathons and triathlons, and I did a couple of Ironman triathlons. And I was at a professional conference, and I bumped into a friend. It was a husband of a colleague of mine, and he is an ultra runner, runs 200-mile races. His coach was one of the three that ran the Running the Sahara documentary, where they ran across the Sahara Desert. So this guy was immersed in the culture and had run many races, well over 100 miles. So I sat down with him at a lunch at a conference, and I said, "I just want to hear your wisdom. What wisdom do you have?" And what he said to me without any coaching is, he said, "If you're feeling pain, I want you to focus on it. Lean into the pain. If it's an injury, you're going to need to stop. Period. But if it's not an injury, it's just a soreness. By focusing on it, two things will happen. You can kind of work it out, move through it, number one. But most importantly, you won't compensate for it." And he explained, that's where most injuries come from, is by favoring a sore leg or a sore knee or a sore foot or what have you. That's when the real injury occurs. And I thought, what a beautiful metaphor for life, right? Lean into the pain. Rumi says the answer for the pain is in the pain, right? Khalil Gibran, who wrote The Prophet, said when his poem about pain talks about this idea that pain carves out a deeper depth in all of us, so we can hold more joy. Right? Those two things, pain and joy and love, are inextricably connected. So I thought it was a beautiful metaphor. But the fact of the matter is, I not too long after that was running in a marathon in Arizona, the Rock and Roll Marathon in Phoenix, Arizona. And a few miles in, I said to my running partner, who was a bit faster than me anyway, I said, "Look, just go on without me. My calf is hurting, and I'm probably not going to make it. So just go on without me. Don't keep pace with me, but go on." And so I focused on it. I focused on the pain in my calf, concentrated on, did not favor it. And I can't explain this, but about mile 7, this started happening around mile 3 or 4. About mile 7, it just went away. And that was the fastest marathon I'd ever run in my life. So it's a literal lesson as well as a figurative or metaphorical lesson. Gaslighting is when we try to tell somebody that their experience is not true, is not real. And we do this because we want to protect our own ego, our own sense that we are good. And if you're mad at me or you're sad in my presence and you're my child, those very emotional energies trigger something in me that says that I'm doing something wrong, that I need to fix the problem. And so when you send your child to our program, you're going to hear more feedback, not because you're particularly toxic or unhealthy as a parent, but because that's the way out of the self-medication. Really, that's what self-medicating behaviors promise, is to take away the pain and the distress. And if that's the goal, then heroin until you die is a perfect plan. Drinking yourself to death is a perfect plan, right? So I want to talk about a couple of other things that have come up that are related to this. Adam Grant is a wonderful, um, he works in the area of business as a psychologist. The word's escaping me right now. Organizational behavior. He works in and around organizational behavior, organizational psychology. And Adam Grant said, in hard times, people don't want to be told to look on the bright side. They want to know that that you're on their side. Even if you can't help them feel better, you can always help them feel seen. The best way to support others is not to cheer them up, it's to show up. And what I say is to sit with them in their unsolvable problem. Advice is cheap. Fixing it feels like gaslighting and discounting it. Trying to explain it away or reframe it sounds like dismissing and discounting the feeling. You're at odds with the person feeling what they're feeling. So looking on the bright side, telling somebody to look on the bright side, while that might have been something that happened to you, that people told you to do that, it might even be something that has helped you. For many people, it is the penultimate example of not being seen and understood and heard. It's the exact opposite of everything that Mr. Fred Rogers was trying to teach us with his television show. For a reference point, go back and watch the documentary that came out a few years ago about Mr. Rogers. His goal was not to help children feel good feelings, happy feelings, but to help them feel everything, to give them a place to express and to feel their pain and their fear and their sadness, their anger. And when human beings are allowed to do that, it moves through them. They don't get stuck in it. People ask me all the time, how do I get my child to forgive me for my choices, or forgive me for sending him away? And my response is, the ironic answer to that question is, the way you help your child move through the anger or the resentment is you don't try to get them to move through the anger and the resentment. It's so hard to do, mom and dad. It's so hard to sit there and allow yourself to be cast as the villain in your child's story. But it's the greatest gift. It is something that you know, aside from taking care of yourself first and foremost, which I'll talk about more, taking care of yourself first and foremost, so that you can be available to the child in this way. That's the real critical task in parenting, is allowing yourself to be cast as the villain in your child's story. And it is a heroic, lifelong task. Last week, I shared this on one of the broadcasts, and I shared it on my social media, and I had several questions about it. So I wanted to kind of transition from authentic gratitude into this next idea that loosely relates. This is a quote from Ram Dass, and it says, I would like my life to be a statement of love and compassion. And where it isn't, that's where my work lies. There's something about this quote. I'm going to read it again. I would like my life to be a statement of love and compassion, and where it isn't, that's where my work lies. There's something about this quote that I think gets misinterpreted by most people that read it at first glance. And that is, it doesn't mean, he's not saying that I want to be a compassionate person and show love in the world. And if I'm not, I then just have to generate more love and compassion and show it. I mean, he is, but he isn't. It's more complex than that. And this is what I wrote about it to explain this. This is a 3-slide thought. The first quote goes like this: the key to compassion for others is self-compassion and self-care. Yet we've been conditioned to believe that self-care is selfish, a slippery slope leading to self-indulgence, laziness, or a lack of accountability. Thus, we fear self-love and are swallowed by guilt at the thought of it. Then we judge ourselves harshly for not having enough patience or compassion for others. So the what Ram Dass is suggesting is that if you don't have love and compassion for your partner, for your neighbor, for your child, for whomever, that you have work to do there. But it's not just about turning that frown upside down and putting it into a smile. It's about doing the deeper work of self-care, taking some time to take care of you first, because love is something that comes out of abundance. It doesn't come out of threat. It doesn't come out of ego, of I want to be a good person, so I will love and be more compassionate. It comes out from having enough, from being enough. It's a natural extent. I wrote this, and some folks wrote in response, and they say, "Well, yeah, but sometimes the pathway to greater love is to love, to greater love for yourself is to love others." Yes, and the fact of the matter is, it's the same love. Technically, you can only love others to the extent that you love yourself, because there's no difference. If you're hard on yourself as a parent, you are implicitly hard on others, your children. If you're impatient with yourself, you're impatient with others. Now, you can try to gloss it over with a presentation that you'll be kind to others, that nice to others. But if that just comes from an ego of trying to get it right, it's not real love, it's ego. So what Ram Dass is inviting us to is, if you are struggling with love and compassion, if you're feeling resentful, this is the same as the book The Dance of Anger by Harriet Lerner. It's the same principle. If you're struggling with resentment, with anger, there's a very good chance that you have been abdicating the responsibility of taking care of yourself to others, and they haven't been following through. So instead of being mad at everybody for not showing up, you have to show up first for yourself. But you don't want to, because it will trigger feelings of guilt because of the way you've been conditioned. I'll read this quote one more time, and then I'll go on to the second quote in the series of 3. But I'm going to read it again. The key to compassion for others is self-compassion and self-care. Yeah, we've been conditioned to believe that self-care is selfish, a slippery slope leading to self-indulgence, laziness, or a lack of accountability. Thus, we fear self-love and are swallowed by guilt at the thought of it. Then we judge ourselves harshly for not having enough patience, excuse me, and compassion for others. And now my favorite quote from Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi said, "A coward is incapable of exhibiting love. It is the prerogative of the brave. Projection, fusion, going home is easy." I've thought about this with my children this week. Sameness is easy. Projection, fusion, going home is easy. Loving another's otherness is heroic. If we really love the other as other, we have heroically taken on the responsibility for our own individuation and our own journey. And this heroism may properly be called love. So if you have a child that's neurodivergent, if you have a child that's struggling with addiction, substance abuse, and you've never struggled with it, if you have a depressed child or an anxious child, you don't struggle with those, that's going to stretch you more. And the goal of parenting is not to mold your children to be the way that you think they need to be. The goal is for your children to become something beyond what you can imagine. Because life doesn't go backwards, right? We don't want them to be like us. We want them to be larger. One of the things that one of my children has told me lately that's been a real gift to them is not that I was a perfect father by any means, but that I was the first one in the line in my family to do my work. And so they had a step up, right? It's the evolution, the spiritual evolution that goes through generations. Just like wounding and trauma can go through generations. We know how survivors of the Holocaust, we know um, how minorities, right? How people of color in the world, the disenfranchised, we know that their trauma can be handed down from generation to generation, but so can healing and so can awareness. And so if you have a child that's just different than you have to get help and support because it takes a lot of energy to support that journey. The last slide reads, ultimately, to love others, we must learn to love ourselves and have compassion for our own humanness, I call it. This is a courageous effort, requiring us to deconstruct the messages from our childhoods and from the culture that taught us that having needs and attending to them is a bad thing. This unlearning, this decontextualizing thing, deconstructing things, unraveling things. This unlearning process is called individuation. And it's what makes you more available to love, more available to connection, more available to serve and to guide. So those are my thoughts for tonight. I wanted to share with you, and I'll just kind of end with these take-home suggestions. If there are any questions, I can look at those. I'll have a few minutes to answer questions tonight. In my experience, mindfulness is a broader practice, a deeper practice than gratitude, than forced gratitude. And that mindfulness inevitably leads to gratitude. Unless we're in an acute crisis and acute pain, which then mindfulness becomes nearly impossible in some of those situations, at times a real challenge. But a daily practice of mindfulness will inevitably lead us to appreciate the non-toothache. For most questions, self-compassion is the answer. If I could flip a magic switch to all the people listening and watching, the switch I would fix would be to love yourself, to forgive yourself, to have compassion for yourself. Because I know out of that, the only thing that you would want to do is show that same love and compassion toward everybody else. The joy is so rich and so deep when we can learn to forgive ourselves and love ourselves. That once we experience it, all we want to do is give it away. I know you have to be yourself first. Again, Ram Dass wasn't saying, if you're not compassionate and loving, be more compassionate and loving. That's not what he's saying. He's saying, there's your work. Like I've talked about lately, the trigger is not in the way, the trigger is the way. Where you slip, where you stumble, when you lack patience and compassion for somebody, there's work for you to do. And it's not going to be pleasant, simple work. It's going to be fighting against the unconscious obligations that you've adopted, inherited from your childhood and from our culture. So you're going to have to combat guilt and shame, not just shame, but guilt. You're going to have to learn that the guilt that you're feeling is most often a lie. And it's not a sign of moral development, but it's the evidence, the leftover of somebody else trying to control what you think you can feel. So you have to be yourself first. Take care of yourself. The secret to compassion, the secret to the compassion that folks like the Dalai Lama show is self-care. Selfish, self-focused self-care. In his case, I'm sure it's meditation, which he is uncompromisingly committed to. Doesn't give it up for anybody. And that leaves him with enough left over to share with the world as he does, as all the greats do. And that the task here is learning to feel. If the task is to be happy, then heroin's a good idea. Crack is a good idea. If the goal is to be happy, drug addiction is the way. Just take it until you die. But there's something deeper and broader than just being happy, right? It's being present, it's being human. The other day I was thinking about it on Thanksgiving. We've lost a few people this last year in our lives. My mother-in-law and father-in-law, a very close friend of mine, closest person I've ever lost. And as I was getting something out of my car on Thanksgiving morning, getting ready for the day to host it here at our house, I was thinking about the people that we had lost this year and how they don't get to be with us this Thanksgiving. And the thought came to me that I get to have one more, at least. That's the gift. The gift is I get to be alive one more day. My friend Peter, my father-in-law Howard, my mother-in-law, they will never feel this Christmas 2023, and I get to feel it. And I get to feel Tuesday, November 29th at 7:16 p.m. That's the joy. And learning to feel comes out of that. And lastly, the I think the most encouragement I can give you is if you're struggling, if your child's struggle, if your marriage is struggling, if you're struggling with depression and anxiety, keep going. Keep going. You're on the right track. But you don't have to do it alone. Find a psychotherapist that can go along with you. Find one that isn't eager to fix you or to bring you to the finish line, but as Ram Dass says, somebody who's willing to walk you home. We're all just walking each other home, he said. All right, I'm happy to take any questions that have come in. I have a few minutes. Somebody writes, your story of physical pain when running a marathon reminds me of a time when my young child was complaining of a neck injury. I took them to the doctor. He asked him some questions and then said, I can see how much pain your child is in because of how guarded he is with his range of motion. I was so moved in the way that he was validating my child's pain in this way. This is an interesting metaphor of how people build defenses against their emotional pain, and a skilled therapist sees these defenses and honors them. I love that sharing. Excuse me. I want to steal your story and share it because it's a beautiful story. And whoever that doctor is, if it's a family doctor, keep them because not only do they apparently know medicine, but they know people. What an amazing story. What is a daily mindfulness? What is my daily mindfulness practice? Um, it's a breathing exercise and a body scan. And I also have a mantra. So during the day, when I'm feeling stressed, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, at times when I'm feeling wonderful, it is just to sit there and feel my body. It's also psychotherapy. One of the things I learned from Thich Nhat Hanh was that psychotherapy is a mindfulness practice. And so the thread of mindfulness goes through my day because I'm always trying to tune into what I'm feeling. When I get into an argument with my wife, I can get in my head and build all kinds of defenses and arguments. Or I can go down deeper and say, you're feeling scared. Not too long ago, a couple weeks ago, we were having a difficult exchange and she was upset about something I'd done or said. And I said to her, I'm not feeling very safe right now. I need some space because it's hard for me to admit my part in this equation because I'm feeling very vulnerable and I want to be guarded. In not so many words, I said that to her. So the mindfulness practice, it's a way of living. Somebody gave me a book years ago called Living Your Yoga. It's kind of like that. It's being present with my feelings. What I've learned as a psychotherapist and as a patient of psychotherapy is that I can be in tune with my feelings, my body, what's going on inside of my metaphorical and literal heart. So sometimes it's breathing. I do have a mantra meditation that I use very often, but a lot of it's psychotherapy is my mindfulness practice. Becoming connected to what I'm feeling, even observing what I'm thinking. The story I told you recently, where I was able to recognize after a couple of minutes about how I was building a defense against my daughter's criticism of me. And then I was able to observe that and share that with my wife and say, I just spent the last 2 or 3 minutes trying to build a story where I wasn't at fault. So it's a way of being. And the practice of the mantra or the breathing or the body scan that I do or the loving kindness meditation that I do, that's just an emblematic moment during the day. All right, folks. Looks like that's all the questions for this evening. We have new programming, brand new programming coming up on February 1st to the 5th, I believe. I will be holding our first multi-couple therapy intensive. Think Finding You for Couples. This is not to come because you have a lot of conflict, but couples who want to come and grow and learn together and do their work together to witness your and support your partner's healing. So a multi-couple intensive on February 1st. On February 24th, I'll be holding, like I announced earlier, my third conscious parenting workshop all day. Contact intensives at Evoke Therapy to learn more. And the next year I'll be hosting a masterclass on attachment-based therapy where you can get continuing education credits also. So the date for that is yet to be decided. The Journey of the Rogue Parent and The Audacity to Be You, my two books, are available on Amazon and Audible. If you would like to do a deep dive into your own work, if you're looking for a venue or a vehicle to do your own work, Finding You is our offering. I recommend it to everybody. I myself have gone to a version of this somewhere else many times. My wife, my two adult children, my business partners, many of our therapists have gone. It's something we believe in. It's something we pay full price for to go somewhere else because we can't do it at our own place, at our own shop sometimes. January 18th is the next offering for Finding You. Next year, there are only 2 spots left. So if you're interested, those are going to fill up. And then February 22nd through 26th is the offering after that. We also have an online offering, January 27th through 29th. The online offering is half the time and less than half the price, about a third of the price. So if resources are limited, it still is a powerful exercise and looking back and finding out what are the issues, the project that you have to work on. Contact intensives at evoketherapy.com for questions or to enroll. We have support groups for alumni and current wilderness families. The next one is December 1st this week. I should note that I know that sometimes these broadcasts are going to overlap with the group therapy sessions. I understand that there's nothing we can do about that because I have to change my schedule on some weeks and it's just going to conflict. So if you have to choose one, attend the parent support group live, and then you can watch this recorded. December 1st at 6:30 p.m. is our next wilderness therapy support group. We have one a month that's just for alumni parents. December 27th at 6:30 p.m. is the next offering for our alumni. And then we have an intensive support group each month. December 13th at 6 p.m. is our next offering for that. Contact Malia at evoketherapy.com for more information on that. We have Evoke Therapy coaches. If you want a coach that's a private coach, individual coach, life coach, couples coach for marriage couples, or a family coach, parent coach, for those of you that are challenged presently with family or parenting issues. We have attachment-based trained therapists who do coaching for Evoke. Contact coaching at evoketherapy.com. We also have pursuits trips anywhere from 3 to 30 days, customized for young adults or families. Think therapy light or sober fun. Anywhere in the world, customized with therapeutic support staff doing amazing adventure activities for you. We ask all current families to just try out 6 12-step support groups, just 6 of them. Any combination of Al-Anon.org, CODA.org, FamiliesAnonymous.org, or AdultChildren.org. You can also go to RefugeRecovery.org or NAMI.org for free resources and classes in your area. If finances are a limitation for you, as they all for most of us at some times, this is an opportunity to find your tribe, to find your people. All of these broadcasts are available on a podcast app, on Spotify or your favorite podcast platform. Just search Finding You an Evoke Therapy podcast, or you can go to soundcloud.com and listen there on your computer. Also, you can find all these broadcasts and the videos that go along with them on Evoke's YouTube channel. You can find Evoke Therapy programs and me, Dr. Brad Reedy, on Twitter and Instagram using the handle at Evoke Therapy and at Dr. Brad Reedy, or you can find the Evoke Intensives program on Instagram using the handle at Evoke Therapy Intensives. On Facebook, you can find us by searching Evoke Therapy programs or Evoke Therapy Intensives. And of course, we have a blog that's curated by Malia and contributed to by all of the Evoke staff each week. If you want to give back before the end of the year, this is Giving Tuesday. We're on Giving Tuesday today, so you still have some time. Our 3 charitable partners include ChooseMentalHealth.org, sky'sthelimitfund.org, or evokefamilyfoundation.org. All of those are 501c3s, tax deductible, and you can earmark those for a child coming to an Evoke program if that is your desire. All right, folks, I'll be back with you in about 48 hours. This will be a live Q&A. You can invite family and friends to this. You can come with questions that they have for you or questions about them. This Thursday, December 1st at 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time, a Q&A for Evoke families and friends. Look forward to that. Thank you on behalf of the people that love you for showing up. Thank you for being willing to do your work. I hope this is a helpful point of contact for you all. Have a great evening, and I'll see you in a couple of days. Bye-bye.